Good afternoon, podcast community. Yep, Twitter's not letting us stream to Twitter. I'm just going to remove it. Oops, sorry. Hold on there. Now we go. Dang, what am I doing here? Okay, so my name is Pete Kane. I podcast for nonprofits too, and we have a person on here. When I heard what he was doing in his work, I said, we've got to get you on the podcast because I love what you said at the meeting that we've met. So tell our viewers who you are, what you do, and who you serve, and then we'll get into the podcast.
All right. So my name is Daniel Gooden. I work for an organization called Teach One to Lead One. So we're a community mentoring program. We teach what we call universal principles, and we go into the public schools during school hours, and we serve. So, yeah.
Wow. So I love it that, the idea, teach one to serve one.
Or lead one.
Lead one, excuse me. That too. That's a good name too. But no. So tell me, how did you get involved in that?
So Teach One to Lead One. It was definitely not on my radar. I was a high school teacher by trade. I did that for really the first 4 years of my adult employment. But my pastor that I was serving under at my church, his wife worked for the organization, and she knew I was looking to kind of get out of teaching and move away from where I was currently living and open the door there. So I had no expectations. I knew nothing about it, but quickly grew to love it once I got my foot in the door.
So I love that. When you're doing that, you're going into the school. Is it set up ahead of time who you're going to be mentoring? How does that work so our listeners can have a better idea?
So it works by a school to school basis. We're in 7 different states and multiple different countries. So every state, every school system operates a little bit differently. But just locally, we'd meet with the principal, we'd establish the program, the cost, everything that goes into it. And it's a 12-week program where it's one class for one block once a week. And so a block, for those of you that may not know, some schools operate off periods. So you'd have 8 classes in a day, and some schools operate off blocks, especially in Georgia. So where we're at, it's an hour and 20-ish minutes where we would conduct the program, or we like to call it an experience, with 4 volunteer mentors. And so we go through our program for 12 weeks, and we do it every Monday here in Georgia.
So how is that different? Because my church, we had a program that we would just connect with the local middle school and did mentoring. So this is more, is it structured or through the organization, Teach One, Lead One? How does that differ from some of the schools that just have people that want to come in and mentor?
Yeah, so what makes us distinctive, and this isn't a knock on any other program because they're all great and they're all doing great things. A lot of people compare us to somewhat of an FCA. What makes us distinctive is the experience is mandatory and it's during school hours. And so it's not something that you opt into. It's not before or after school. We're reaching the kids that a school wants us to reach up to their discretion, and it's mandatory. So it's during school hours that we're allowed to do this.
Yeah, that's quite different because I'm familiar with the one, and it was more after school. You would make the contact with the student, and you would, on a weekly basis, it was time with that student. So this is worked into their periods, to their blocks, and it's set up. So what when you're talking to a principal, what are the advantages of that versus just a regular mentoring? What do you see in your experiences so far?
In my experience, I'd like to say it's our curriculum. So we've been around since 1996. And so it's almost going on 30 years of everything that the schools like in regards to academics, behavior, attendance. And so those 3 metrics, just me being in the school system, those are your 3 social emotional learning goals that any type of program you bring into the school, it needs to meet those kind of metrics. So we have data for almost 30 years that backs that up. And so that's one, schools love that, but they also love our curriculum. We are a faith-based organization, but one thing we don't do is we don't preach in public schools.
Right.
One that's kept us safeguarded to where we're allowed to go into schools. I'm sure you could get away with a lot more in Georgia than you could in other states. But across the board, especially when you think we're in Washington State, completely outside of the Bible Belt. And so it's not that we're ashamed or afraid of the gospel, but we are a faith-based organization, but we teach what's called universal principles. And so those are examples like respect, integrity, self-control, excellence, encouragement. So these things that we bring into the classroom, they're derived from the Sermon on the Mount. They're derived directly from what Jesus taught. We just don't have a verse or a number beside it. And so our CEO, Dr. Lori, her vision that was cast over this the nonprofit organization was God's word will not return void. And so where some people may have an issue of, well, you don't have altar calls, you don't do this. Well, the Bible says that God's word is not going to return void. And so that's our way to stay in the schools and meet kids where they are during school hours. And it's shown a lot of fruit. This is only a year that I've been working here, but I've seen some transformation in kids' lives. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of mentoring. I think that going through life, you have to embrace the concept of mentoring because it is so beneficial, just a general term. What would you say, like when you were thinking and getting involved, you obviously were in the school system, you saw the different things that were going on. What were you ever mentored before you got into this, or were you ever involved in it in your school?
So my school in particular that I came from, we didn't really have anything like this. I graduated from that high school, came back and taught at that high school. And so my entire experience there wasn't anything like this. It was a really rough school. Personally, for me, I had great parents. I love my parents. They've been incredible. And so I had a very strong structure, just the family that I had and got brought up. And my youth pastor at that age had a really big impact on me, really mentored me a lot for about 3 years through high school. And so I think of that and different coaches and stuff like that. So I definitely had a lot of mentorship growing up.
That's awesome. What would you say for our viewers that are out there that they feel led to mentor and be involved? What are the steps that somebody that they're hearing this and they're going, man, I like to be involved in that? What does it look like? What are their next steps?
So they would reach out on our website. That's t1l1.org. Super short, super simple. But no, you would just apply to be a mentor. And the only prerequisites that we have for mentorship is one, you have to pass a federal background check. That's just, if you're going into a school, that's just part of the course.
Oh, yeah.
But then we also have a training that you would go through that's going to let you know what it's like to be a mentor, things that you need to know, like our curriculum. And then it is just a statement that you're going to follow or that you live by our 10 universal principles.
How deep are they in Georgia versus some of the other states?
So in Georgia, the location is our global support center. So the people who are employed in Georgia are, for example, me, I'm a fundraiser. And so I'm raising money, gathering funds so that the program is funded. But then we have our program side that continually develops the curriculum, updates it, prints everything off, sends we call them the buckets, but all the materials that are needed for a classroom for the sessions. And I say all that to say the employees in Georgia are meant to facilitate nationwide and worldwide. So right now we're only in one school in Georgia. We had, I believe it was 7 other schools that we were in pre-COVID. And after COVID, it kind of dwindled down because everyone was kicked out of the schools. But that's the initiative this year, is that we're actually growing in Georgia to pick back up to where we were. But I'd say one of the primary focuses of us in Georgia is to facilitate the growth everywhere. And so we kind of get spread a little thin, in our state in particular. So we're trying to grow and expand to where we can get back to where we were.
What's the difference between your role as fundraising versus actual hands-on in the school? Is that a different role within the organization?
So as staff members, we all mentor. We're what you call a lead mentor. And so you'd have one lead mentor with 3 other volunteer mentors. We use a lot of resources in the church, youth pastors. We actually have one head pastor that mentors with us here in Georgia. And so we all mentor, and I think it's super important because my role, once again, is a fundraiser. I'm meeting with investors. I'm meeting with potential people that want to give to the organization to fund the program. And I think you can get lost in the weeds of just trying to ask for money. To be honest,
Right.
if you're not actually in the classroom, you can forget why you're doing it. And so, yeah, all the staff we do mentor once a week, just as any of our other mentors. But we don't necessarily have a position of mentor. We all do it.
Mm-hmm. That's so important that you're still connected to the students, and you're constantly, out there, so you are aware of how things might be changing in a school system, a state, whatever. But that's good. What about? I think I know the answer here. So when you are going into the school, you're taking care of one period. So you might have 20 people in the classroom, or maybe larger than that. Is that how it works?
I know, at least in the school that I was at, we had a max of 28 kids that can be in a classroom. It varies school to school, but give or take 25 to roughly 30 kids in a class.
And you say you have 3 mentors per period?
4 if you include the lead mentor, so 4.
Oh, wow, that's good. Yeah, I like that ratio. Obviously, it's well thought out. Give our viewers a little idea of what kind of stories, without mentioning names, but give us our idea of what you're seeing in your first year. What impact have you been able to kind of get your head around and see personally?
The coolest one to me, in my short experience, I could tell you plenty of stories of when I was a teacher, but on the flip side of working with Teach One to Lead One, most recently we had a student. I won't say his name, of course, but he wore a hoodie, had his hood on, every class, headphones in, completely disengaged. And most people would write that off like, that's the kid we want to reach. That's the kid who needs it the most. And you're there once a week, and it's a 12-week program, and around the 4th or 5th week mark, you see walls starting to come down. You see students starting to become more engaged, but unfortunately, he still had nothing to do with us. Come graduation time, so we do a ceremony at the end where we celebrate them graduating the program, because it's an accomplishment that we want to award them for. We have a celebration. We bring food and snacks, and we give out certificates to all these kids, and then awards for people who went above and beyond during the program. But before the graduation, we give out invites and say, hey, especially the kids that we know that are going to get an award, we're kind of like, hey, make sure you invite your parents, So for him, we gave everybody an invite. He actually invited his sister, and it was his sister showed up to graduation. And I didn't bring this up earlier. I forgot. But one of the reasons that he acted the way that he acted, it came out around that 4th, 5th week mark that both of his parents passed. And so it was just him and his sister at the house. And so it's very, I couldn't imagine how difficult that must be. So it kind of gave us a little bit of an indication of why he was acting the way that he was acting. It allowed us to show a lot more grace. But his sister ended up showing up to a graduation, and he still had his head down, didn't really say anything. But it let us know that we were reaching him. Like, he was listening enough to where he wanted to invite his sister, because we didn't speak to her personally. So he would have had to go home and do that. And the 3 other mentors that were in the class, other than us, for this one, we actually had 5 mentors, because I was just so new that they were like, hey, come and observe and, see how this works. This fall, I'll actually be taking on a lead mentor role now that I've gone through it. But our other 3 mentors, other than the other staff member, they were all pastors. It was a campus pastor, a youth pastor, and then a family pastor from a local church in the area. And they, once again, we don't preach at the kids, but we definitely do our shameless plugs, because of course they're going to ask, and they wear their t-shirts. So it's like, hey, I'm at so-and-so church. He ended up showing up to a youth service at their church.
Wow.
And he wasn't, he was probably generally invited, but it wasn't like there was a conversation that was had. There wasn't a one-on-one invite. Like, he just showed up.
Right.
And we got word back from that pastor that had happened. It was like, wow, like, this kid who didn't speak, didn't engage with us at all. It just gave us a really, really good indication that what we're doing matters. And it's it led to him, walking into the doors of a local church, and it was just really, really cool.
That's, I love that, because in this day and age, it's sometimes scary for people to walk through the church doors, the different things that have happened, and you might have had a bad experience with a church experience, and you sit there and you write everything off. Like, it's not like you go to a restaurant and you have a bad meal, you don't quit eating, but we do sometimes, when it comes to our church experience, we build those walls up. And so if you don't get somebody that, because we always, just for the sake of here, you want to be connected. Isolation is the worst thing you can do. And so you want to be connected to other people. And so even if you said there was nothing to it by just having community, people want to be in community. They want to be connected, because we're so disconnected sometimes with our social media and texting, and just, we don't get down to people kind of thing. What would you say when you looked at this? What was your first impression? You just kind of like, for the person sharing it with you, what was going through your mind?
If I'm just being completely honest, I was so burnt out from teaching that I applied anywhere and everywhere. My school was going downhill. We had 5 students shot and killed in 4 years. One of those were actually a student that was physically in my class. It happened outside of school, but I had to go back to class with an empty desk. And so that was a big wake-up call for me with the 1-year-old at home, where I was like, I'm really trying, because I want to make an impact in this school, but I have a wife and a daughter at the time, and now 2 daughters that I've got to get them in somewhere better than where I'm currently at.
Yeah.
And so my first initial thought was, praise God, somebody is giving me a job interview.
Yeah.
And so that was my first initial. I had no expectations. I'd never heard of Teach One to Lead One. I'd never experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
All I could go off of was the recommendation of a very trusted friend that she loved working there.
Right.
And when people say, "Oh, we're a family, this is a great place," you kind of back off. You're like, "Oh, I don't know about this," but she's incredible. Her and her husband both. I served under them, and so I trusted her when she said that this was a good place. And so I just took a step and kind of figured it out on my own from there.
Wow.
I mean, of course, I thought it was a cool thing.
Yeah.
But not having any experience with it, I really had nothing to go off of until I got there.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Like you go into teaching wanting to make an impact. Then you realize that, dang, this system is not really what I had intended, because you get into paperwork, you get into what you just said, the violence, and it kind of like softens your passion to impact, but you still want to impact. So you're kind of like, God closes one door and he opens another. And so what would you say, like, let's go back to when you were teaching. Can you imagine like the 2 worlds right now? Give our viewers kind of an idea. You're still making an impact, but what is your mindset today versus back then, when you're obviously got the challenges you just shared with us?
Yeah. When you said red tape and paperwork, that is teaching. Unfortunately, when you get into it, of course, a lot of people, there's 2 reasons that you want to go into teaching. You want to help kids, and you want your summers off. So those are the 2 big pluses to teaching, right?
Yes.
And so I definitely enjoyed that. I coached. I really felt like I made a big impact. There are students that are 3 years removed from graduating, and they still call me and, "Hey, Mr. Gooden, how's life?" They want to check up on me. So it's like,
really, that's cool.
So I know I made an impact teaching.
Yes.
But that's my biggest selling point for Teach One to Lead One, is that I lived that life. I was a teacher. I was in the grind of being at a rough school where these are the kids that we want to reach. I've been cussed out. I've been pushed. And they're back in my class the next day, even after a write-up. And it's just, the stuff gets thrown to the wayside. And teachers are definitely neglected. And I can't say that's across the board. That's just my experience. But also other teachers have similar experiences. So it's happening. And I can tell you that Teach One to Lead One alleviates some of that off the teachers, because as much as I wanted to, as much as an impact as I wanted to make, there's only so much you can do, because I want to be a mentor. I want to be a therapist. I want to be all these things. I want to be a counselor to these kids. I mean, in the community that I was living at, most of these kids didn't have a dad. And so it's like, I want to be a dad. I want to be that influence. But I also have my work that I have to do.
Yeah.
I have to teach. I have to get my lesson plans in order. I have to make sure that my board, if you're a teacher, I'm sure you'll understand what I'm saying, but my board is perfect. So when that administration comes in, they see all the red dots, every T is, crossed, every I is dotted. So having to balance my full-time job as an educator to make sure that they're educated in what I was teaching, on top of doing all that, year after year, it weighs on you, and you either have one or the other. And if I don't want to be fired, then it needs to be that I focus on being an educator. So unfortunately, that's what a lot of teachers go through. And I think the beauty of Teach One to Lead One is that it's a third party that one gives teachers a break. I mean, that's kind of part of our program, is that that's 1 day a week where the teacher just gets to sit back and go,
wow.
And we're taking the reins. We're facilitating the class. And it doesn't have a negative consequence on academics, because all of our data shows that academics go up after our program. And so teachers love it. It gives them a break, but also it helps alleviate some of that, because we're leaving these teachers with better behaved kids, ones that demonstrate our universal principles, respect, integrity, self-control, like all these things are being implemented. And even if they don't implement them right away, at least it's on their brain, and teachers can even call back on it. Like, hey, you remember what Mr. Daniel said, right, about integrity? Like, why'd you cheat on your test? Like, so it definitely helps teachers in a way that I wish I had this program at my school, right? Because I think potentially I may still be teaching.
Wow, it's incredible testimony to how you feel about making your impact now versus back when you were involved 100% into the school system. What would you say, like, raising money is everything? If money is not flowing, then we don't have a good situation. So tell our viewers, we have a very giving community. How can they support your fundraising activities? Because the more money you have, I'm sure the more schools can come online, and you can be able to impact there.
One of the local schools in our area, in this Cobb County area, am I okay to say names of schools?
Yes.
So North Cobb High School, they've already given us a green light. Like, hey, we want every classroom in this building to have it. But we have to have our volunteer mentors that want to support us, but also the money coming in to fund the materials it takes to run that. But one thing I would like to say is our philosophy as far as fundraising goes at Teach One to Lead One. If someone wants to drop a check off today, I'll shake your hand and say, thank you, God bless. But so that's always welcome, but it's not really how we operate. Right. I want to develop a relationship with you. I want to sit down, have coffee with you, and I want to talk to you on the phone, see how you're doing. That's how it's always not necessarily transactional, but relational. And that's how we like to operate. That's what keeps people around. It's one thing for someone to drop off a check and just say, oh, that sounds awesome what you're doing, and then I never hear from you again. We don't like to operate that way. But if you do want to give or get in contact with me, I believe that my number is below.
Let me see here, right here.
So there's my phone number right there, but also t1l1.org. Our wonderful staff has made it extremely easy to give online. It's the biggest button on the front page.
Good.
That says give.
Good.
And so when you go to the website, it's really clear. You just click on it, and you can do cash. No, I'm sorry, not cash. You can credit card. I believe it's credit card, Venmo, PayPal, and Zelle that you can do.
Okay. That is like, because I had a friend of mine, and he's moved from here, but he was sharing like a philosophy, because he's 95 right now. So, and he said, and he was talking about people wanting to leave an impact, people our age, like not your age, but our age, seniors, they get to reflecting later in life, and they say, you know what? I can't take this money with me. If I give this money to my kids and they don't earn it, it gets all jacked up. So you're looking to make an impact out there. And I can see where, if you are out there and you're listening and you have the resources to make an impact, because if we can't help the future leaders of America. I mean, the future kids that are growing up, and we can't pour into them with the kind of program that you're describing, where you're getting that mentoring, because then you don't have a good, healthy generation coming up. So I'm just appealing. If you're listening to this and you say, I don't have it right now, share this podcast with somebody that can help support Daniel, help support the organization that's making an impact on our schools and our kids. Because, hey, we only have one life on this. It's a short life, really, when you look at it. So making an impact is important. And I know we have a lot of resources in our senior community, because I see how they spend money. So making an impact and circulate around. So get a hold of Daniel, sit down with him, like, get ready to write a check, come on, let's get the money working to make an impact in our local place, and then our kids around the area, because the more we can pour in to the resources that are out there, I'm sure that it goes to the volunteers. Let me ask you on the volunteers before we wind down. So if I'm sitting and I'm listening to this, and I'm a senior and I'm retired, and now I'm looking for something to do, because my Rotaries feel the same way. We had a gentleman just joined, and he was I think electric engineer or mechanical, one of the engineers. And he said, now I'm kind of looking at my life as, how am I going to make an impact into the retirement years? So what about the volunteers? Speak to our people that want to be a volunteer and see that being involved in it. What does that entail?
Absolutely. And so it's a 12-week commitment. And the reason we say that is the kids need consistency. And that's what makes the program function, is when these kids, you can have someone come and give an encouraging word and speak one time and you never see them again.
Right.
That doesn't, it can make an impact. I'm not going to say it can't, but the consistency of the same people showing up for 12 weeks, by the time you hit that 3-4 week mark, they're like, oh my goodness, like, this crazy person showing up again. So that consistency is what we preach, that you've got to be there for 12 weeks in a row. But it's an hour and a half commitment once a week for 12 weeks. And so that's what we ask of our volunteer mentors. And we love our volunteer mentors. We can't do anything without them, because there's only so many staff members. I think in our Georgia location, I want to say we have 10 or 11 employees. And they all have very important, distinct roles, from IT to marketing to our CEO to program. And that's who would actually facilitate the mentoring and getting you involved. Mentoring would be our program office. So on our website, you can apply to be a mentor. And that would go over to our program department, where they would interview you. You'd get the background check, and you'd go through the process of training, which the training is virtually online. It's a few videos of our history and our founding, and it just kind of goes through what it's like to be a mentor and what's expected. And some of the other, I don't want to call it red tape, but it just talks about our policies when it comes to mentors, as far as like mandated reporting. You're not a confidential source as a mentor, nor if you're a pastor, a teacher. If something flags, like, you have to report it. That's something that we pride ourselves on, is that if you tell us something and disclose to us something that you're in danger to yourself, you're a danger to others, like, we have to report that. And so that's a lot of what the training goes through as well.
Well, I'm a firm believer in training. We do that. Everything we do, I greet at my church, and there's training there. I mean, so you think, all you do is smile. No, there's more to it than that.
It's a battleground in the schools. I mean, a lot of people, they want to do good, and I know they want to do good, but they don't understand the climate that we're in now in schools. And you have to be ready for the fact that you're going to talk and speak to a group of kids where I'd say like 60% of them are going to be staring at their phones with headphones in. And you have to understand that it's going to take a few weeks to break through that.
Right.
And so that's another thing we try to prepare our mentors for. It's just the current climate of the kids in our schools that we need to reach. A lot of people that would turn them away, and they would be like, I'm not giving my effort and energy into this. And it's like, those are the kids that need it most.
Wow, that's great. Is there because we have people 95 in our community here, is there an age limit that you like to, give us the range so my viewers can kind of get their head around if they are in that range?
I haven't heard of an age limit.
Oh, really?
I think it has to deal more of capacity.
Okay.
Like, here's the thing. Do you love kids?
Mm-hmm.
Do you love mentoring kids? Like, if that's not on your checkbox, then you're probably not a good fit to be a mentor.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Not everybody's a great fit to be a mentor. A lot of our people that give financially would be like, oh no, I would not be good at speaking. I don't do good with that age demographic. So it's not a bad thing. It's just it's a preference and what your gift set is. So if you're 95 and you're still spry and you're still able to reach kids, absolutely.
Hey, I love it.
I'm not going to put a cap on that.
Yes. And I think that, we're only, age is a number. So if somebody feels young and you want to keep making an impact and you're sitting around, you're not as busy and you're not as engaged in making that impact, then I want to encourage them to call you. And I'm sure you can lead them to the right people. So Daniel, for the people here on Spotify that don't have video, give your number. Go ahead and give your number so they can get a hold of you.
That's 770-468-5551.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for venturing through the Kennesaw traffic, because anybody can make it through that maze to the studio is a pretty persistent and a gifted, direction person. So thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. Well, before we go, one thing, what would be the one thing you would want to leave our viewers with today?
The one thing I'd love to leave with you guys is, one, just thank you for listening, but two, even if it's $25, even if it's $10, it goes so far as impacting a kid's life.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the business, not business, but we're in the, I'll say that for lack of better terms, we're in the business of transforming lives and impacting the kids in our schools. That's what we do. And even if it's $20, that goes a long way when it's multiplied by as many people that can give. And so even if you think your gift is insignificant, even if you think you're not qualified to be a mentor, I'd say God calls the unqualified and equips them. And so if you have any amount of interest in what we're doing, feel free to reach out. I'd love to have a conversation with you. That
is awesome. Because $20, that's a number 2 meal at Chick-fil-A now. So just, miss a meal, miss 2 meals because of the cost of fast food now. It's rather expensive. So redivert your funds to a better cost. So thank you so much, Daniel. We appreciate you taking the time and sharing what's going on in your life with our community. We appreciate you.